Hello, everybody, and welcome to this chapter introduction video. In this video, we'll be covering what you need to know as an overview about civil rights for the AP US Government and Politics test. In the textbook we use, that's chapter 9. Now, civil rights, we might contrast it with civil liberties, right? Civil liberties were all about the protections individuals have from the government. For instance, the example we always talk about, the freedom of speech. Civil rights are much more about the treatment of groups. The word that probably should come to mind the most with civil rights is the word equality. Equality being a central value not only to the United States of America, but to our shared humanity, right? To the idea, as well, we'll be talking a lot about MLK, right? That injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Equality and justice are the themes in this chapter, and I'm going to give you a few things to think about as you read through your textbook. First, 3 key concepts to make sure you're looking for. First and foremost, civil rights policies. These are the laws like the Civil Rights Act or constitutional amendments like the 13th, 14th, 15th, 19th, 23rd, 24th amendments. Those helped advance equality for particular groups. What are you looking for? You're looking for those laws that were passed by the government. You might be looking for Supreme Court cases. You're looking for amendments, things that advance this notion of equality for any particular group. Even the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. In every textbook, this is probably going to be the most common thing you find in this textbook chapter, and make sure you're paying attention to it. Up next, civil rights movements. Civil rights movements, we think of the civil rights movement, right, in the 1950s and 60s by the African-American community, but you're going to be looking at a variety of movements and organizations and what they did to successfully get the government to respond to their plight. And last but not least, civil rights today. There's a lot of debate over what the current frontier of civil rights is. Is it more equality for women? Is it issues over LGBTQ? And the one that will come up on the AP test a lot that is very interesting is this issue of affirmative action. Is this a civil rights problem, or is this necessary to achieve true equality? You know, the 2 things we're going to want to make sure that we're looking for, because they are very, very different, and they one flows out of the other, and it could be easy to just sort of overlook this. That's Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education. What you need to know about Brown versus Board of Education, I will cover that in another video, but these 2 cases are very interesting because they, in one case, it established the precedent for segregation for separate but equal, and the other case defeated segregation in separate but equal. And so you're going to want to look at the different historical periods of time through these 2 cases. Plessy versus Ferguson happening sort of in the immediate 30-year aftermath of the Civil War, post-Reconstruction, and Brown versus Board of Education coming at a very different time in the 50s. You want to really be able to know the differences between these rulings and how they are also connected. And last, your chapter mantra for this time is that nonviolent direct action is necessary for a government response. As I mentioned, we'll be talking a lot about the words of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and his letter from Birmingham jail in this chapter. And one of his biggest ideas, that power, that freedom is not usually given up by the oppressor. What needs to happen if a group sees a need for change is they need to have action that is both nonviolent and direct. You can see the imagery of what Dr. King talked about when he said we were there training for weeks and weeks and weeks, saying, are you prepared to be hit by a police officer and not retaliate? That's what it takes to get the public on your side to cause real change. And the government response part is here is pretty interesting too, right? What are we thinking about there? Remember, up to this point, we've learned there are a lot of different parts of the government. We have 3 branches. We have the federal level and the state level. And what I want you to look for throughout this chapter is each of those branches have at times helped civil rights and at times hindered civil rights. At times, the states were the biggest enemy of civil rights. We might think of the Civil War, right? But then when we look at the issue like LGBTQ marriage equality, well, the states were ahead of the federal government. And so one interesting way to focus your notes for this chapter could be to look at each of the branches and the federal versus state governments and see how they've helped and hindered the battle for equality. So that's what you're looking for in this chapter. First, 3 things to note. You're going to identify amendments and laws that advanced equality. You're going to describe civil rights movements that were successful, and you're going to apply your knowledge from those 2 things to ongoing struggles for equality. As you're reading through this, make sure you understand the nuances and differences between these two drastically different cases, Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education. And lastly, keep that chapter mantra in your mind that nonviolent direct action is necessary for a government response. Remember, a government response, there's a lot of different parts of our government, and each of them have helped and hindered civil rights. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I wish you all the best as you start reading. Have a great day.